Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, the Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, is calling for the UK to take action against the use of British overseas territories and dependencies as tax havens. The leak of millions of documents from a Panamanian law firm has revealed the rich and powerful globally hiding their wealth offshore on a massive scale. More than half of the 200,000 secret companies set up by the lawyers Mossack Fonseca were registered in the British Virgin Islands. We'll talk to Jeremy Corbyn in the next few minutes. The latest revelations also show that Mossack Fonseca kept clients who became subject to international sanctions. They included companies linked to North Korea's nuclear weapons program and a close relative of Syria's President Assad.
The United Nations, US, OFAC, Treasury in the UK, the EU, they all publish lists of sanctioned individuals and entities. You can download those into your monitoring systems and screen for compliance. It's a fundamental 101 issue that you should be doing as a bank, as a law firm, as a company formation agent. It's very simple and is a basic thing that should be done.
Well, prosecutors in Panama say they will launch a criminal investigation into the law firm. Many of you have already told us you're far from surprised at these revelations. And whilst it may all sound like big money swirling around amongst the rich and completely remote from your own life, there is a key reason to care. If the world's most powerful people are paying less tax, that means there is less money going into the government to pay for things like schools, hospitals, road building programmes, etc. And that is why the Prime Minister is being urged to take action. Well, let's go to our political guru, Norman Smith, in Harlow, where the Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, is due to give a speech on tax avoidance. Norman.
Thanks very much indeed. Well, Mr Corbyn's just in a cafe meeting local members of the community in Harlow, but of course all the papers today focused on this big story about tax avoidance. David Cameron, of course, has been sucked into this because of his father, Ian Cameron, who the leaks disclose, of course, had an offshore fund in the Bahamas, and the government coming under pressure to be seen to be doing more to crack down on tax evasion and tax avoidance. Now, speaking to Downing Street folk this morning, they have strongly defended their response so far, saying that the Prime Minister has already raised it at international summits like the G8, for example, that they've already sought to introduce what's called a register of beneficial ownership, so you can actually see who owns companies. They've sought to ban bearer shares, which basically provides people with anonymity. So they take the view they've done an awful lot, but there is now, I think, a growing momentum to do more. Now, I'm hoping we can grab Mr Corbyn in just 2 secs if he'd be good enough to come over here, but we might just have to pad a bit. Otherwise, I may have to walk over and grab him if he's not ready to come over. Mr Corbyn? Mr Corbyn, could I just grab a word with you? If you want to sit down over here, please. Thanks so much. Thanks very much. Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn just joining us. He's here for the Labour local election launch, but you've also had strong words to say following the leaks we've had from Panama about the extensive sort of tax avoidance that appears to have emerged there. Now, you have said that you think the government is paying lip service to tackling this. What do you mean by that?
Well, we've got revelations of tax avoidance on an industrial scale, of companies being set up in the British Virgin Islands, then moving themselves across to Panama, not paying any tax anywhere. In the case of British Virgin Islands, that is a British colonial dependent territory. Surely to goodness we can at least stop tax evasion and avoidance in British-controlled territories, this has to be addressed. This is money that's taken from our health service, our local services. The people that need it are losing out because of tax avoidance.
So what should the government do? You say the money is, the tax avoidance is happening in British overseas territories and dependencies. What do you want the government to do to stop that?
Well, an examination of those that have placed money there that appear to have done it to avoid tax and come after them to collect that tax back. Start off with, we need to properly resource and fund the HMRC, the Revenues and Customs Service, so they've actually got enough staff to go after these people and investigate this. But secondly, say to the governments, those that administer Cayman Islands, British Virgin Islands and a number of other places, hang on, you are a government of a British dependent territory, a Crown territory. You must abide by UK tax law. You must not become a harbour for tax avoidance and tax evasion. And the more the revelations come out about this Panama Bank, the more murky the whole thing becomes.
We heard from the former Liberal Democrat Business Secretary, Vince Cable, last night, who said what the government should do is simply impose direct rule on these British overseas territories and dependencies. Do you agree with that?
That was what was done during the financial crisis in a number of cases where orders in council were used to impose direct rule. I don't particularly have a problem with that, because if the local government in the area, the government of those places, is simply going to condone this level of brass badge companies and tax avoidance and tax evasion of money that has been made in Britain through business tradings or investments in Britain, then that's something that has to be considered.
I suppose the difficulty is these are self-governing, autonomous jurisdictions, so it would be an enormous and presumably very complex legal step for the British government to say, right, we're taking charge.
Yeah, but the point is, they are not independent territories. They are self-governing, yes, but they are British Crown dependent territories. Therefore, surely there has to be an observance of UK tax law in those places. If they've become a place for systematic evasion and shortchanging of the public in this country, then something has to be done about it. Either those governments comply or a next step has to be taken.
And that next step would be direct rule, but what sort of time frame do you think?
Direct rule can be done very quickly if that's what the government decides to do.
What, within days?
Yes, indeed. It can be done by an order in council. It can be done almost immediately. The point is, those dependent territories' governments have got to get to understand the anger of people in this country when they read of this industrial scale of tax avoidance and evasion.
What do you say, though, to number 10 who say, hang on a sec, Britain has actually been in the lead here. We've done more than any other country in the world in terms of trying to ensure greater transparency.
Well, saying you're in the lead and being in the lead are often two entirely different things. Yes, there has been some good rhetoric about this. Yes, there has been some good statements. But the revelations from one legal firm in Panama of evasion in Panama and the link to British dependent territories because of that tends to indicate that they're talking a great deal but not walking much.
I mentioned in the papers there's Mr. Cameron's name crops up again and again because of his father. Do you think Mr. Cameron has questions to answer personally?
Well, there are questions that have been placed there about his family's estate and about his father's investments. Obviously, they must be part of that investigation. The investigation must be independent, fast, thorough and fair so that we get to the bottom of this. But people that have made a great deal of money over decades by siphoning their wealth out of Britain, putting it in a tax haven somewhere around the world, are actually shortchanging the people of this country.
I know you've got a rush. Let me just ask you one more, if I may. Mr. Cameron had previously talked about publishing his tax returns. Now, that hasn't happened. Would you publish your tax returns, and do you think ministers should publish their tax returns?
I have no problem whatsoever in publishing my tax returns, as indeed most other people don't, because...
But you would do that?
Yeah, my income is what I earn as a Member of Parliament.
And what do you think ministers should do? Because there is an argument to say that it's a confidential matter, a private matter. Tax affairs are always about personal matters.
I think we need to know where somebody's income comes from, and in that sense it should be open and above board, because the public need to have confidence that their representatives in Parliament, their representatives of ministers, are getting their income from honest and open sources as Members of Parliament.
Hey, Mr. Corbyn, thanks very much. I know your minders are telling me to wind up and you've got a local election launch, so I will let you get off to that. But thanks very much for your time. Interesting there then, Mr. Corbyn suggesting that some form of direct rule perhaps should be considered of these overseas territories to ensure they comply with British tax rules. Also saying, of course, interesting, that he would be happy to publish his tax returns and urging ministers to do the same. So I suppose a story which started out really as a scandal about leaks, it is becoming increasingly political now.
Thank you, Norman.